everyone. On behalf of myself, the staff, board, and patients of People's Community Clinic, it's my distinct privilege to extend a resounding thank you to everyone who has joined us today. I used to think of People's as the plucky little engine that could, and indeed we did. From our very humble beginnings in a church basement, People's has grown to be a full-service, federally qualified health center with over 300 employees, caring for 20,000 patients and providing over 80,000 medical encounters a year. You, our most dedicated supporters, made it possible. You made it possible for us to grow into a 59,000 square foot building, to offer integrated behavioral health services and pain management care. Your support made it possible for us to introduce dental care to the list of medical services available at People's. And it was your trust and confidence that helped us weather the COVID-19 storm that has ravished so much of the healthcare industry. We are forever grateful to be part of a community that understands and appreciates the tremendous effort that goes into providing high-quality healthcare with dignity and respect, and without regard to a patient's ability to pay. Thank you indeed.
Hello, I'm Sujatha Ajmera, President of People's Community Clinic's Foundation Board of Trustees. Thank you for joining us today.
And I'm Bill Hopkins, also with the Foundation Board. We'd like to welcome you to this year's There's No Such Thing as a Free Lunch annual event. We had hoped to see all of you back at the Four Seasons this year for this popular and always fun event. But out of an abundance of caution and in consultation with our clinic's medical leadership, it was decided that the best way for us to celebrate another year with People's was to do this event virtually.
But we have so missed seeing all of you in person the past 2 years. However, we have had 2 exceptional virtual events, and we believe we have another great one in store for you this year.
That's right. There's plenty to celebrate and talk about with regard to People's, none of which would be possible without the generosity of those of you who have joined us today.
The clinic could not touch all the lives it does without the help of our supporters and the community, supporters like all of you. And though no one knows for sure what lies ahead for COVID, one thing is for certain, our community still has very important work to do. Before we get started, we would like to extend a special thank you to today's title sponsors and our foundation partners who have made not only today's event possible, but who are the reason that our little clinic that could has become a national model for community health. Thank you to Rudd and Wisdom, Ricky Rushing and Alan Gilmer, the Neville family, Sarah Buss, the Nolan Family Fund, Marina C. Fuentes, the Law Office of Becky Beaver, and the Nyland Family Fund. We also owe a deep debt of gratitude to the St. David's Foundation for providing sustaining support since 1996, and to the Episcopal Health Foundation, Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, and St. David's Medical Center for partnering with us to bring our innovative programs to our patients. Many of you are familiar with our work and our commitment to ensure access to critical services like comprehensive women's health care, which includes annual wellness exams, breast and cervical cancer screenings, and contraceptive counseling and supplies, among other things. Your donations go directly towards services like this with the highest quality of care.
In this year's program, we want to give you an insider's look as to how the clinic uses its holistic approach to helping Austin's most vulnerable with mental health challenges, especially those impacted by the worldwide pandemic. The physical ravages of COVID were bad enough, but the diseases have also left a trail of psychological injuries in our community as well. And people have struggled with things like loneliness, isolation, unemployment, grief, and loss. To cite one devastating statistic, approximately 200,000 American children have lost at least one parent during the pandemic. That is only part of the toll this disease has inflicted on all of us. So, today's program will be focused on mental health. We will speak with providers here at People's who will shed some light on how the pandemic has affected the emotional well-being of our patients, from adolescents to adults, and how the clinic cares for those with mental health challenges.
Many mental health issues are triggered by life-changing events or experiences, and who among us hasn't had one of those in the last 2 years? For our patients who are dealing with mental health challenges, the clinic provides help through not only counseling services, but also fully fledged programs developed for our patient population. During this event, we'll look at the clinic's Integrated Behavioral Health, or IBH, program. IBH is, as the name suggests, integrated, or joined together with medical treatment provided by the clinic. Most importantly, it is driven by the patients, who initiate their own care simply by indicating a desire for help. Once this occurs, the patient sees their physician, one of the clinic social workers, and in some cases a psychologist or psychiatrist, who all become the patient's care team, working together to address a patient's needs.
People's IBH initiative has been called the gold standard for such programs and has also received high marks nationally from a Harvard University study as well as other reviews. Here to tell us more about IBH at People's is Robin Roselle, Director of Social Services at the clinic.
The behavioral health program and services at People's are integrated, which means we do not operate separately from our other services, particularly our medical, physical health care. So we aren't a standalone kind of therapy practice or mental health practice. So our patients have to be a patient here at People's for their medical care, for their general primary care. And if they are experiencing a mental health issue, say, such as depression, that usually comes up in their visit with the provider, and then that provider will refer them to the IBH program for ongoing services. Our approach at People's Community Clinic differs from many other clinics and settings for several reasons. One being that we really try to fit the treatment to the patient. We don't go in with a preconceived idea of how many sessions they're going to need or, how long we're going to be able to see them. If a patient is coming with some really deep-rooted and long-standing issues, those aren't going to be solved real quickly. Either they took a long time to develop and they may take a little longer to kind of heal. A real goal of ours is to provide the same level and quality of mental health care here and therapeutic services here than that you and I would get maybe going to a private practice therapist. And I think that's a value of People's Clinic in general.
I think something that I would love people to know about the IBH program at PCC is just the great things that have come out of it. We have so many patients that are constantly just living their day-to-day, surviving. And then they come in and see us and they're able to get, services in an integrated way. So it's not just therapy services. They're able to have us work directly with their medical provider to provide medication treatment if needed. And the fact that we're able to provide these services and see them going from just simply surviving to people that are thriving and that are able to, finally feel like a weight has lifted off. I've had so many patients come in and tell me, I couldn't have received this anywhere else. The fact that we're able to provide that is just so incredible and rewarding. And just seeing some of my patients, go from people that are constantly suffering to feeling happy and being able to enjoy their life is the best gift that I could get.
What I find with People's is there's never been any judgmental issues. I think that they're that same safety net that I experience. I've seen it with people spreading. It didn't matter sexual orientation, religious preference, race. It just didn't matter. Your citizenship. It just came down to people, and that's really what this place is. That's a perfect name because it is a people's clinic. And that's what I've seen, that's what I believe, and that's why I've chosen to make it my clinic.
Something that I have just come to increasingly appreciate is the strength and the resilience of the patients we work with. We hear unmentionable, horrible stories of trauma in some of our patients' lives. And if I keep wondering if that had happened to me, would I be able to be walking and talking at the same time? But these folks have survived and they have a lot of internal strength. And if we can tap into that, we want to treat the whole human, the whole person, and not just their problems.
Hi, I'm Nancy McDonald, and this is Drew, who isn't much of a talker, so don't mind him. I have been a member of the foundation board at PCC for 10 years. I vividly remember my first tour of the clinic in 2012, where I was struck by the heart of the doctors, the administrative staff, nurses, and educators, all of whom had such a clear commitment to the health of their patients. Today, Central Texas is experiencing rapid population growth, and at the same time, we have unprecedented challenges within healthcare. One thing I know we can count on during this time is that PCC will continue to set the bar high, delivering competent, compassionate care to those in need. So for that reason, we would like to ask of you, please make a donation to this institution that is as uniquely Austin as live music and Longhorns are. Your support of the team at PCC allows them to continue their work at maintaining and improving the health of our growing community. So from Drew and from me, we say thank you.
It is estimated that more than 100 million Americans struggle with chronic pain. This pain epidemic has fueled its own mental health crisis as many spiral downward, unable to manage their constant and overwhelming pain. As a result, these life consequences make things worse. This epidemic has turned into a dual tragedy as the misuse of powerful opioid painkillers meant to help manage pain has actually fueled addiction, abuse, and more than 75,000 deaths from opioid overdose. Through People's Integrated Pain Management Program, or IPMP, patients learn how to manage chronic pain without the use of opioids. Through these services, patients have access to a multidisciplinary program featuring medical and mental health care integrated with acupuncture, yoga, nutrition, and more.
Our integrated pain management program has also garnered national recognition as a model program for addressing pain management without opioids. The clinic's program is highlighted as an exemplary integrated pain management program in a study conducted by Duke University. Of the programs studied, People's is the only one housed in a community health center and accessible for those who are low income or uninsured. Here to talk about this trend-setting program is its director, Dr. Sharad Kohli.
So when you look at some of these guidelines by the Joint Commission, the CDC, American College of Physicians, they recommend non-drug approaches for pain. So these may be things like exercise or behavioral health approaches, acupuncture, chiropractic, yoga, massage. And so one of the things that we offer here at our clinic, which really is unique compared to other pain management programs, is that we actually try to integrate many of these services together. The group visits are really important. We offer groups where people get together and they are able to kind of learn from one another. There's more time for the providers and the other staff members to hear their stories and understand their pain. So you just get a better feel for who the patients are as people. You're just building community. And that's a really key component to healing that's often overlooked in the standard medical practices oftentimes.
I was part of the integrated pain group here, and that really helped me because I was surrounded by other people who had like situations where they were dealing with pain, chronic pain, and the pressures of life that come with that. I was very, very sick when I arrived here. It was more than just the back injury that had me here. It was, I had kidney problems, I had, emotional problems, I had problems speaking. There were just a plethora of problems. And so the doctors here addressed each one of those problems as a whole, not just a single piece, but as a whole. And together, that got me moving in a new and better direction, which is why I'm here now. They literally saved my life.
This type of work And this type of care can be transformational in some ways, that we can actually be able to do some of this with other chronic conditions, that it can be effective in a lot of other ways. So our goal would be to expand this type of model out beyond pain into things like behavioral health, like mental health, into diabetes, high blood pressure, other chronic diseases as well. It views health in a different way. It's more holistic. We have more treatment options, a larger toolkit that allows patients to pick and choose what they actually want to do. So it's more patient-centered and patient-driven also.
No tengo seguro médico, entonces para mí ha sido un apoyo en todos los sentidos. De la colaboración de Genevieve, que fue la de yoga, Kelly con las terapias, Araceli, Diana, que es la nutricionista, todos me apoyaron mucho. Fue una ayuda incondicional, una ayuda que yo inclusive no dije que eran ellas, sino que dije que eran mis ángeles, que era el mayor ejército que yo tenía, mis ángeles, y yo siento que los ángeles las pusieron a ellas, a todos ellos, incluyendo el doctor, y yo logré recuperarme.
Good afternoon. My name is Megan Hughes. I'm a proud board member for Peoples. I've been on the development board for about 10 years now, and I became enamored with Peoples initially when I went to a young professionals happy hour where I saw Regina Rokoff give a wonderful speech. She spoke about the holistic nature in which they treat individuals in the community and all the people that they've given back to over the years. I'm so grateful that you've come today to show your support for Peoples and to be a part of this organization that I truly believe in. Have a great afternoon, and thank you again for being a part of People's Community Clinic.
You know, one aspect of COVID that hasn't received a lot of attention, or as much attention as it deserves, is the effect of the pandemic on its survivors, particularly children. Many of our young people are dealing with grief, guilt, and loneliness due to the loss of a parent, grandparent, or other relative. Others have been stressed by isolation from friends and peers and the massive changes in everyday life and educational routines. All of these factors have created a unique set of emotional and behavioral challenges for people. People's Center for Adolescent Health has responded with focused and enhanced efforts to deal with this largely unexplored area of trauma.
That's right, Bill. The Center for Adolescent Health is the only local comprehensive adolescent medical program for at-risk teens in the area. Through this program, Peoples provides specialized care for low-income, underserved teens in Central Texas. This includes not only traditional services like physicals, immunizations, and reproductive health counseling, but also help with school problems, and especially important these days, behavioral and psychological care. We are proud to see that Peoples and the Center recently conducted a virtual networking and learning symposium on adolescent health during International Adolescent Health Week that included discussions on mental health unique to this population. Here to talk about Peoples' efforts are Dr. Jeff Hutchison and Dr. Celia Neville.
The treatment options that we recommend for adolescents vary a little bit from adults. We know that therapy is the primary source of treatment. We know medication by itself is usually not enough, but one of the things that we're able to do here that other places may not be able to do is just ask those questions. Because when you come in for a twisted ankle, for birth control, for acne, you may not expect your doctor to ask, how's your life going? Are you dealing with stress? So we try to get them to open up and talk about those things first. And the treatments that we do, we encourage them to do talk behavior, talk with our therapist, get outside counseling, talk to their school counselors, and talk to us too. We're very, very happy to have those conversations and remind them that they're not alone.
Two things, right? So I have the Center for Adolescent Health where we focus on those young people, and then we have the Goals program. And there is a lot of intersection between those. So there's this concept of sort of developmental health, behavioral health. So we've already have a higher risk population in the sense that I see a lot of youth that are what we call neurodivergent. So people with ADHD, autism, anxiety, learning issues. We also have a population that's had a lot of trauma. And so all of that, we serve, and we've also had the program, but then we also just have our adolescents that are also facing a lot of issues. And those adolescents also anxiety, depression, We also, unfortunately, have had some youth that have had child onset psychosis, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder. So really that full range is what we see. The Goals program and the Center for Adolescent Health are amazing programs. They are high standards of care. Sometimes I think they're a best kept secret. My own children couldn't get the care that I deliver here. I mean, to walk in and have health ed, have social work, have nutrition, have the lab, and then have physicians and nurse practitioners that will sit with you, hear what you have to say, be with you, look at your holistic health needs, that know you. I mean, that's just an amazing thing. So I am just really proud of that work. We've seen thousands and thousands of youth. I have many youth in college now getting nursing scholarships. I mean, we have definitely affected and changed lives.
One of the reasons I came to People's Community Clinic was because of the staff and the people I work with. It's not short of miraculous that during this time, everyone who I worked with was taking care of each other. So we take that and apply it to our patients. I love to tell people who I teach about adolescents and who I work with, if you think of young people as a member of your family, a nephew, a cousin, just someone who you care about, you're going to deliver excellent service. So that's what makes People's different. We see all of our patients as part of our family, part of people who we could be related to, and we give the same kind of care that we give our family members.
Thank you, Dr. Hutchinson and Dr. Neville, for your great work. The Center for Adolescent Health is creating a better and healthier future for the young people whose lives we touch.
And now we come to a very special part of our program. There have been countless heroes who have been instrumental in guiding our communities through the darkest days of COVID. Those heroes include the dedicated staff of People's, who have worked tirelessly and selflessly over the past 2 years. We salute them, along with all the healthcare workers, first responders, police, and fire personnel who have been on the front lines of this fight. We also salute you, the supporters of the clinic, and behind-the-scenes heroes who have made it all possible.
Today, we are very pleased to honor two individuals who might qualify as superheroes. They are Texas treasures who have not only been on the front lines, but they have led the fight to end this health crisis.
Dr. Peter Hotez and Dr. Maria Elena Bottazzi have dedicated their careers to studying epidemiology in the underdeveloped world. They've recently earned international acclaim for their efforts in developing a patent-free vaccination for the COVID-19 virus. This vaccine, called Corbevax, was developed at the Texas Children's Hospital Center for Vaccine Development at Baylor College of Medicine. It is now being manufactured and will be distributed in a number of countries, including India, Bangladesh, South Africa, and most recently, Botswana. It is work that has garnered widespread praise for the doctors and their team, praise that includes a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Despite the fact they received little encouragement and even less funding from our federal government, Doctors Hotez and Bottazzi persevered. They decided not to patent the formula for their vaccine and have encouraged all nations to use their technology for the public good, just as Dr. Jonas Salk did during the polio vaccine some 70 years ago.
As Dr. Hotez has stated, the coronavirus is constantly mutating. Though we have now seen several variants of the virus surge and ebb, there may well be, and there probably will be, more variants developing among unvaccinated populations elsewhere in the world. That's why it's critical that Corbevax, which is relatively inexpensive and easy to manufacture and distribute, is now available.
We are all connected. Vaccinations amongst traditionally underserved populations will not only help those who are vaccinated avoid the pain and suffering in their own lives, they will also help us here, because the vaccinations reduce the possibility of a new variant developing amongst those populations and spreading internationally. So, by developing the Corbevax vaccine, Doctors Hotez and Bottazzi are helping us serve and protect our patient population, and indeed, the entire community here in Central Texas.
In 2020, when the coronavirus outbreak started, we already knew exactly what to do in the lab. Our specialty has always been recombinant protein vaccines, and we created this vaccine center with the hope that indeed we could hand over a technology to the countries that have the greatest need. And to be honest, in 3 months, we were able to create a prototype of a COVID-19 vaccine, which now is going to be deployed in billions of doses around the world.
But what's great about our vaccine is it's a technology that's been around for 4 decades. So we know what's going to happen with this recombinant protein vaccine. It's completed now all of the clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, very exciting results. And now it's been released for emergency use listing in India. The game changer for what we're doing at Texas Children's is in that spirit of Texas, we're actually making vaccines. We're making the vaccines that no one else will make, because if we can't make it at low cost and widespread accessibility with simple storage conditions, we're not going to make it at all. And that's a very unique type of approach.
It doesn't stop there. They're already doing clinical trials to evaluate the vaccine in the pediatric population, extending the accessibility and the reach of our Texas Children's vaccine, because we can really contribute to really bridge this gap and really squash the virus all over the world.
Now we'd like to hand it off to our leader, Regina Rogoff, for a very special presentation.
The W. Neil Kasurik Health Advocacy Award recognizes people who have distinguished themselves through their efforts to improve the health of our community. Mr. Kasurik, co-founder and executive at Radian International, is remembered as a brilliant leader and a consummate civil volunteer. He touched countless lives through his efforts in public and higher education, transportation, water, social equity, community development, and healthcare. He was especially proud of his work as CEO of the St. David's Partnership, where he imbued 6 partner hospitals with a charitable mission, resulting in over $100 million in uncompensated care. He was also a great friend of People's Community Clinic and our work to make healthcare more accessible to our uninsured and underserved neighbors. I am confident that if Neil was here with us today, he would be thrilled by our Kasurik Health Advocacy Award honorees, Dr. Peter Hotez and Dr. Maria Elena Bottazzi. I can't imagine 2 people more worthy of this award. These 2 scientists, innovators, and philanthropists have developed a COVID-19 vaccine during the worst possible pandemic in U.S. history. And by using traditional vaccine technology and making it patent-free, they have ensured it is widely accessible throughout the world, which will help vaccinate nations with fewer financial resources. Your remarkable work not only improves health locally or even nationally, but globally. You are certainly deserving of this award. We are honored to have you with us today to accept, and it is my great privilege to present you with the People's Community Clinic 2022 W. Neil Kasurik Health Advocacy Award.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Well, and you certainly are our health heroes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Regina, thank you very much for your very kind remarks. What a privilege and honor it is for me to receive this Neil Kasurik Award for health advocacy along with Peter. The People's Community Clinic, with its leaders and staff, really exemplify the strengths and the true meaning of servant leadership. As a servant leader, you and your staff see the opportunity to serve others, listen, share knowledge, to empower others, and measure success with growth and development of our communities. Hence, your vision and mission to improve the health of medically underserved and uninsured Texans is really an inspiration for us to be more transformational. So thank you. We have always wanted to understand how poverty could be explained and reduced. And we do know that poor health caused by many infectious diseases can really have an effect on poverty, but also can exacerbate poverty. So in Texas, for example, the official poverty rate is more than 13%, more than 4 million people. And it's really significantly worse than the national average, as well as now we know that the pandemic probably increased that. With Peter and our team of scientists, we came to Texas to learn, to research, to educate, to raise awareness about preventable infectious tropical and emerging diseases. Diseases that are caused by parasites like Chagas disease, leishmaniasis, intestinal infections, cysticercosis, toxocariasis, many others, many that a lot of people don't even really know what they are. But they're all diseases that afflict poor people. That is why our scientists create and make vaccines against many of these diseases. We transfer our knowledge and the vaccines with a philosophy that ensures open science, the removal of barriers, and with transparent communications to help incentivize, build, and strengthen the capacity of vaccine development locally and with foreign nations. In doing so, we really guide and influence policy and advocacy through what we call vaccine diplomacy. So we hope that our story really exemplifies how the importance of intersection of science and technology with diplomacy, engagement, and service really strongly believe that can be an accelerator and a game changer to achieve equity in health. And that's what we love to do. And so we currently are very thankful for the more than 50 years of service that your community is receiving with very high quality, affordable healthcare, dignity, and respect. You're helping the community really ensures the progress of the population living in Austin and in Texas, reducing poverty and social inequality. As highlighted by the author Peter Block, communities are the structure of belonging. The W. Neil Kosuric Health Advocacy Award recognizes people who have distinguished themselves through their efforts to improve the health of our community. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Regina, and the People's Community Clinic. And thank you, Mary Elena, for your eloquent comments. Indeed, we came to Texas 11 years ago with this idea of building here a National School of Tropical Medicine. And while they're officially called tropical diseases, they're overwhelmingly diseases of the poor. Poverty is the overwhelming determinant of neglected tropical diseases. For a lot of reasons we can go into. There is also the effects of climate change, and Texas, of course, is disproportionately affected by climate change and urbanization and human migrations, but poverty is the king of all drivers. And so we share that commitment to health equity and addressing these poverty-related neglected diseases. The irony is about 10 years ago, we also started doing coronavirus vaccines because they were orphaned just like the vaccines for diseases, as Mary Elena points out, Chagas disease and schistosomiasis. So we started doing that using the same approach where you can develop those vaccines locally in low and middle income countries. And we're able to turn that around very quickly for a COVID-19 vaccine that's now reached 30 million adolescents in India. And hopefully that's just the beginning. I think the other piece of this that we have to recognize in this time of COVID is that it's not only promoting vaccine science, but combating the anti-science. Unfortunately, Texas has become the epicenter of the anti-vaccine movement in the United States. And it's a killer. During this Delta wave last year, I now calculate that roughly 200,000 unvaccinated Americans needlessly lost their lives because they were defiant of getting vaccinated. I look forward to working with you in People's Community Clinic, not only on addressing health inequalities and vaccine inequity, but combating this terrible anti-science movement, because it's now become as an important part of health advocacy as well. So we're so thrilled to be recognized by the People's Community Clinic and so grateful for all of the great work that you're doing and your service. Thank you.
Thank you both so very much.
Thank you, Joy and Regina. Doctors Hotez and Bottazzi, we thank you and wish you much continued success in your work and with your nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Now, on to our keynote speaker. Larry Wright is not from Austin, but we claim him anyway. Born and raised in Dallas, Texas, he attended Tulane University and later earned a Master of Arts degree from the American University in Cairo. He started writing for Texas Monthly in 1980 and quickly made a name for himself for his features and profile stories.
Larry is a man of many talents, a musician, a playwright, a screenwriter, and a novelist. He is perhaps best known for his meticulously researched investigative journalism, as seen in books like The Looming Tower, Al-Qaeda and the Road to 9/11, which was published in 2006 and won a Pulitzer Prize for general nonfiction, Going Clear, Scientology, Hollywood, and the Prison of Belief, published in 2013, and his most recent book, one of particular relevance to this luncheon this year, The Plague Year, America in the Time of COVID, which was published last summer.
A longtime staff writer for The New Yorker and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Society of American Historians, and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, Larry is uniquely qualified to talk about the cultural, historical, and scientific dimensions of the 21st century's first pandemic. We are very excited to have Larry as our featured guest for this year's event. And we're also grateful that our longtime friend, Evan Smith, CEO and co-founder of the Texas Tribune, could join us to visit with Larry.
Larry, good to be with you. Good to see you.
Evan, it's always good to be with you.
Strange to live so close to each other and not actually see each other, but this is actually one of those moments when I get to come see you, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to do it. I just wish it were more often.
Me too.
We are indeed here, sitting here in the third year of this pandemic, and while the public health emergency has largely dissipated, people are still getting COVID. Right? I mean, as much as, you know, we're all tired of the protocols and tired of the precautions, there are still things that are in place and need to be in place. I wonder if way back at the beginning when you were working on your novel, The End of October, which obviously was extraordinarily amazing and predicting effectively what we were going to go through, and then the book, which was The Plague Year, which was really the nonfiction telling of the story. Did you at that time have any inkling that The Plague Year would ultimately be plague years plural?
Well, I might have titled it differently. I did, in the sense that I always, you know, all the public health people compared this to the 1918 flu. But it wasn't the 1918 flu, it was the 1918, 1919, 1920 flu. And
we've just branded it as if it were short term.
So it lasted, and then it mutated and became a different kind of flu. And then it came back 50 years later, and then another 20 years after that. So it recurs. But I had a sense that, you know, with this coronavirus, it's not influenza, but it is a chronic virus. And so we're kind of stuck with it, I believe, in one form or another.
There has been, over the last 2+ years, a lot of focus on the origins of this virus. Who is to blame? What is to blame? I don't feel like after 2 years, I can say I know. And my question is, do you know? Will we ever know? Does it matter? Should we care? Or is it immaterial at this point?
We might know one day. There are two plausible scenarios about how this virus emerged. And one is, it was like SARS-1, which 2009, it came out of bats. It went through an intermediate animal, another mammal, that was probably sold in a wet market in Guangdong and passed into a human and became a human disease. And because we know, because it was shown in bats to be a very similar disease and in other animals, that's a very plausible scenario. And that was, so when this SARS-2, as it's known, and you know, the virus that causes the disease, COVID-19, it was thought something similar to that happened. It came out of bats, and there is a bat virus that is very similar to the one that infects humans. Maybe it went into a wet market in Wuhan, which is what they first thought, and then passed from an intermediate animal, possibly a pangolin or a raccoon dog that was sold in the market for consumption, and then into humans.
Right.
That's plausible, but not proven. The other scenario is that there are actually two virology institutes in Wuhan, one more famous than the other, the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Both collect bat viruses and analyze them. And at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, it is a biosafety level 4 facility. That's the kind of place where people walk around in spacesuits and, manipulate viruses inside glass boxes with these thick gloves. But they were doing experiments in that facility. They weren't at level 4 spacesuits. They were at level 2, which is about what you'd find in a dentist office. And they were taking bat viruses and doing what were called gain of function tests. The object is to determine what would it take to make this a human virus. And one way of doing that is you take a virus from a bat, for instance, and you put it in the nose of a ferret, which is much more human-like than a bat. And you make that ferret sick. He gets infected from the bat. And then you take a sample from that ill ferret and give it to another ferret, and then see how many passes it would take to make it into a disease that passes freely from one ferret to another. If it does that, it is very much like a human disease. And there was a famous experimenter in the Netherlands, Ron Fouchier, who did that with H5N1, the very virus that right now is in poultry all over the United States. Millions of chickens and turkeys have been killed to prevent its spread. But H5N1, people do catch it from poultry or from birds. And when that happens, 60% of the people who get it die. So Fouchier was using that ferret example that I told you. It only took 3 passes to make it into what was a plausible human disease. So in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, they're doing experiments very similar to that.
Yeah.
And U.S. intelligence suggests that 3 people in that lab in November of 2019 checked into the hospital with COVID-19 symptoms. And, there are other examples of, how this may have passed through.
Right, but what I'm not hearing is anything that would be malicious. It sounds like it was incompetence, maybe, right?
I'll tell you,
or lack of care taken.
I don't subscribe to either theory, but I do think what is malicious is the Chinese behavior in covering it up.
Right.
And, with the first SARS epidemic, they hid it from the world. World health authorities went to China to investigate what was going on with the first SARS outbreak.
Yeah.
And Chinese authorities actually hid the patients in ambulances and taxis until the authorities went away.
Right.
And World Health regulations were rewritten to take into account the obfuscation. And Chinese behavior in this instance is what makes that second theory that I just enunciated much more plausible, because they shut down labs that were doing work on COVID-19. They punished scientists that talked about it.
Right.
They humiliated people on television. They forced doctors not to wear masks in hospitals because they would give the wrong impression where they were actually getting sick and dying in hospitals.
As we contemplate what happened looking back, it seems like there were 3 things that we lacked. Preparation, in that there was no playbook. Now, you point out, ironically, there was a playbook, but we just chose not to ignore it. So we didn't actually base our reaction to this on the basis of a playbook. Even though there was a playbook, we became, we were unprepared at the beginning of this. We lacked execution in that when it came time for us to put testing regimens in place or distribution of vaccines or whatever else, that we seemed woefully unable to pull that part off. And then there was just, generally speaking, lack of leadership.
Yeah.
And it was errors of commission and errors of omission on the leadership side, active sabotaging of efforts to deal with this, or just complete checking out and not doing anything. Like the classic perfect storm of all these things combined.
A good example of that is that Matt Pottinger, who was a National Security Council.
Big character in your book.
Yeah.
Right.
He happened to have been a reporter, which I think is key. The American intelligence community had no idea about this. They didn't see it coming, and when they did see it coming, they didn't think it was going to be serious.
Right.
Matt had been in China reporting for the Wall Street Journal during the SARS epidemic. And so he called some of his sources. He speaks Chinese, he speaks Mandarin.
Yeah.
And so they told him, wash your hands, socially distance and all that, but if you want to put the brakes on this thing, you have to mask up. It's the only thing you can do. And so he became an advocate for masks and finally persuaded the public health contingent and people on the National Security Council that this was a good thing to do. And they talked the president into, supporting it.
Finally.
And then he goes on TV and says, holds up a mask and says, I've been told that this is, will help. And, maybe you should wear it. I'm not going to wear it.
I'm personally not going to do it. Exactly.
Then he visits a mask making factory without a mask.
Without a mask on.
And they had to destroy all the masks in the room because he might have contaminated them.
Right.
That was an example of the kind of leadership we had. But I also want to counter that by saying the Trump administration did one thing that was very important, which was Operation Warp Speed.
Right, the vaccine development process they deserve credit for.
They do, because it was unprecedented. They guaranteed the pharmaceutical companies that they would be reimbursed for their investment in vaccines, whether they worked or not.
Right.
And because of that, in part, we were able in the fall of 2020, the fall of 2019, to have vaccines underway. And so, think about the country would have been like if we had no vaccines at all during the entirety of 2020, when Delta and Omicron come along and they're massively contagious and we had no defense.
How much worse would we be sitting here today in year 3?
Yeah.
Right? Quickly, before we wrap this, Larry, the story of the last 2+ years has been a story over and over of bumblers, people who did not get this right.
Yeah.
Who are the heroes, beyond the frontline workers who have been at the forefront of getting all of us back up on our feet, healthy, treating our families, dealing with us, often at their own cost and expense,
Yeah.
and in some cases losing their own lives in the process. Who are the heroes? I mean, I'm struck this week as we sit here. Dr. Fauci made the point in one interview, the pandemic is largely over, and then had to basically walk. Even Dr. Fauci is kind of caught up. Of course, he's been a controversial figure for this whole time. Who are the people who you think about over these 2+ years as the people who got it right, who are the heroes of this?
There are a lot of them, but just what comes to mind, first of all, Barney Graham. Barney is an immunologist at the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, which is Dr. Fauci's shop.
Right.
And he and Jason McClellan, who is a structural biologist, a new field in medicine, who came into Barney's lab, created the vaccine in 3 days. Now, how did they do that? They had been working on other coronaviruses, MERS and SARS. And so they had a template. And they had learned, thanks to structural biology and this advanced imaging, they could actually see in the smallest levels of the virus. Imagine, back in 1918, they couldn't even see viruses.
Right.
They didn't have the concept of a virus. But they were able to see the spike, which elongates and like a harpoon when it goes in and attaches to the cell. They were able to tie the spike down and use that as the vaccine.
Yeah.
So the body recognizes the spike protein, and your immune system charges in. The spike protein you're given in the vaccine is totally harmless.
Wow.
So in 3 days, they are able to take the template they've been working on with other coronaviruses, apply it to SARS-CoV-2, the COVID-19 vaccine virus, and 6 months later, Moderna started human trials.
Yeah.
Then, there's so many healthcare workers that I talk to, and at Bellevue Hospital, America's first public health institution, for instance, they don't turn away anybody. And other hospitals knew that, and they would unload their COVID patients on them because, they were all being choked full of. And so Bellevue managed to, survive this incredible first wave in New York and handle it and set an example for all the other hospitals at the cost of course, some of their staff who died. And then there are doctors like Ebony Hilton who, she's an anesthesiologist at the University of Virginia. But to intubate patients is one of the most intimate acts you can perform as a doctor because you have to get right into their, the nasal passages and she did this night after night, day after day, oftentimes the only anesthesiologist in the hospital, and having to sequester herself from everybody else. So she lived alone with her dogs, didn't see her family for a couple of years, and actually, like many healthcare workers, because hospitals stopped doing discretionary medicine and surgery, she suffered a pay cut. I also think some of the governors, some of them behaved, with great insight and courage, and
at great risk.
At great risk themselves. So, I think it's been a test, and I'd like to think, I spoke to this interesting woman, Gianna Pomata, who is a historian of diseases, and she used to be at Johns Hopkins. She lives in Bologna, Italy, and I called her and asked, what pandemic in the past would you compare this to? And she said the Black Plague in the 13th century in Italy, not because of the death rate, which was far greater. It killed a third of Europe, but just because it changed the mentality. And this was the Middle Ages, and medicine was in part built on astrology, and so the doctors were conferring about the placement of Venus in the heavens and stuff like that when people were dying of the plague. But that experience caused doctors to become more experiential. What's actually happening in front of us? And they abandoned some of their old core beliefs, the influence of religion and astrology on their science. And also finances were changed. It was the era when there were serfs and people were subjugated, they were confined, they fled their farms and into the cities. All of Europe and all of life changed, and that was the opening to the Renaissance. And Gianna, doesn't really think that we're going to have a Renaissance, but a shift in thinking about who we are and what. And I started thinking about that, and I thought, well, this is kind of like an X-ray of our society. You can see all the broken places. We're not the country that report depicted in October of 2019. We're a totally different country, and we know it now. And it's an opportunity to fix the broken parts of our society. And it's also, I think, COVID-19 is a harbinger of what's to come, because whether it was created in a lab or in nature, we're going to see more pandemics in the future. If you look back at just since the turn of the millennium, we've had Zika and West Nile and Ebola and Nipah and bird flu and SARS, just one after another at a faster rate. Society's having to cope with that. And I think that this experience has taught us something about the need for science to be ready, for our society to be prepared. So in a way, you could also think of it as a gift, because if those things happen, at least we now know what to do.
Yeah, let's hope for whatever silver linings we can take away from this.
That's right.
Larry, we're out of time. Thank you.
Been a pleasure.
Good to be with you.
Hello, People's Community Clinic Luncheon attendees. My name is Lindsay Leverton, and I serve on the board here at PCC, and I wrote a little song for you. I hope it tugs on your heartstrings as well as your purse strings. 3 little words make all the difference, and it's People's Community Clinic. So consider giving money. A little bit goes a long way, honey. Maybe this time we all belong and it's alright. It's time to be the change, and we're so glad you came. Don't you hesitate, let's get our giving on while you enjoy this song. Just go ahead, lay your card down. Inspired by PCC, it's time to give freely. Just go ahead, put some cash down. We hope you'll give something someday, somehow.
That brings us to the end of our program today. And what an amazing program it's been. But before we go, we want to leave you with one last thought related to COVID and mental health.
It's been a rough 2 years, folks. We've all been through situations since the pandemic started that were unexpected and unfamiliar at best, and tragic and life-changing at worst.
Talk to your family and friends, and even a counselor. It's okay to ask for help if you need it. Your family and your friends would want you to do that. You can't help others if you're not taking care of yourself. And speaking of your family and friends, make sure they know you care and that you're available to talk.
Such an important reminder, Bill. Thank you. And on behalf of the Foundation Board for People's Community Clinic and the many thousands of Central Texans served by People's, many thanks to all of you who've joined us today. None of this would be possible without your generosity. And we've said it many times, but it's true every time. You are the true superheroes in this story. Thank you all for being with us today. And if we don't see you before then, we'll see you next year.
Thank you. See you next year.